guys, welcome back. So if you're new to seed starting, I wanted to give you 5 common mistakes that I know I've personally made and I've seen plenty of others make as well. Hopefully as a guide on things not to do if you are new to seed starting this year. The first one on my list is do not start all of your seeds at once. I know this was something I personally did the very first year I gardened. I had no idea, I did zero research. I just picked up every seed packet that I knew of things I wanted to grow. I started them all at once. I had no idea at the time that certain things do best at certain times. I didn't know that there's certain lengths on when you should start things inside. But one thing I will say is I did post a short video on this, I think last week, on how I organize my seeds for seed starting. And one thing I do is I break everything down into groups by date on when I need to start them inside and outside now. So I actually have 4 separate dates that I will be seed starting inside this year. I started my onions, which we already did. Here in a few weeks, I will be starting my celery, and then roughly the 1st to 2nd week of February will be the bulk majority of my seed starting. But then 4 to 6 weeks before my last frost, I also have a good chunk of seeds as well. But that is why I do this. That way I'm not just starting something when it doesn't need to be started. I'm not going through my seed packets every single time to figure out what do I need to start this week. Everything is just grouped together, easy peasy. There's really not much you need to think about otherwise than just starting your seeds. But with that being said, there's also a variety of seeds, this is my second point here, that you really should not be starting inside. So for example, I also have 4 containers of different things I will be direct sowing outside. With these 4, I actually have one that I will be direct sowing before my last frost, and then the rest will be all direct sown after my last frost, so toward the end of April. This also just helps me establish what things do I not need to worry about until it's warm outside, really. So the point behind this, and you may be wondering why do you not start everything inside, some things just really do not like to be transplanted at all, especially things like beans. This is a whole bunch of different green bean varieties. Those don't really like to be transplanted. They have shallow roots, they're very tender, and honestly, they grow really fast anyway, to where you really don't need to worry about seed starting inside. And that's another thing. I've had this question asked before on do you need to start seeds inside? And the answer honestly is no. I do this personally for just an extension of my season, since my plan is to try to grow as much as I possibly can in my backyard, and this system just kind of helps me be able to establish when I need to plant out what, and that way the hard thinking is just in the past. So the third thing I have is make sure you follow the seed depth. So a lot of people make this mistake and plant their seeds the same depth in the soil each time. That's not what you want to do. Each seed has a different depth it needs depending on the size of the seed. So if someone were to give you seeds and there's not an instruction packet, because most instruction packets will tell you the depth that you need to plant it, a good rule of thumb to follow is double the depth of the seed. So kind of double the amount of how big the seed is, and that's how deep you want to plant it in the soil. This just really helps with germination rates to make sure that you are getting the best out of your effort into planting the seeds. For some reason, I always feel like I mess up when I start seeds, but it always works out. I don't know why, it's just this weird thing I have. I'm like, well, what if these seeds don't sprout? And they always end up sprouting because the depth was fine. So just keep that in mind. Make sure you're following seed depth because it does make a difference with germination. So 4th on this list is not having enough light. So if you are starting seeds indoors, make sure you have a really good light source. You can find some really good cheaper light sources. I will link the ones I have down below. There's also a lot of really expensive ones out there. You really don't need to go all crazy on it, but you don't want to go the cheapest route either. The very first year I went the cheapest way I possibly could. I definitely did not have enough light. So one thing you will notice, if you're not having enough light on your seedlings will probably get leggy. One way to prevent leggy seedlings, one, is make sure they're not too far away from the light. So when you first start seeds, this will so imagine this being like the surface. So this is the surface of the soil of your seeds. You want that light to be pretty close. And as those seeds grow, you can raise that light up. But if the light is already up here and your seeds are down here and they germinate and that light is never adjusted, what can happen, especially if they're not getting enough of that light, is they will grow long and leggy. So that means they're not as short and dense, and what can happen with that, you can still get crops out of it, but sometimes it can cause just not as good of a stem. So the stem might not be as strong, you might have a harder time with those seedlings just in general, and it's a really easy thing to avoid. And last but not least, we want to remember to harden off our seedlings. So this is something you will not need to worry about until come right around springtime when you are planting out your seedlings, but you want to make sure you are hardening off your seedlings. And that is important because they are used to a very sterile environment. They're used to not intense sun. They're getting an artificial light source. There's not a lot of wind. You probably have a fan for some airflow. But other than that, they're not really exposed to the elements. So what you want to do is gradually expose your seedlings to the elements. So what I do is I will let my seedlings outside for just a few hours initially, and then I bring them back inside for the rest of the day. And I will keep extending that length of time for roughly a week to 2 weeks before I plant out the seedlings. That way they are established to the wind, especially because I live in Kansas and it gets windy here. And if I were just to throw out those seedlings, the wind alone would probably destroy them. And we also have some very intense sun here as well. And one thing that will happen if you end up leaving them out too long is you'll get sunburn, and it can just cause a lot of damage. I will also note, if you are hardening off your seedlings, make sure you are giving them a really good water when you place them outside, mostly because those conditions are going to dry out your seedlings a lot faster, and that can cause your seedlings to just die really fast. So the hardening off process is really important, and I definitely suggest doing some research on it if you are new to seed starting this year. But those are the 5 things I had for you guys today. If you have any questions on seed starting, please leave them in the comments below. I will definitely answer as much as I possibly can. I know the seed starting journey can be one that's kind of intimidating at first, but honestly, it's so easy, and I encourage you all to do it. So again, if you have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comments below. I hope this video helped you guys, and I will see you all next week. Bye.